coming, the sun's zooming in, meltdown expected, the wheat is good there, engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning.
Hello everybody and welcome to the By the Minute Arsenal podcast, our penultimate podcast probably of the season after events in Madrid last week. It's an odd mix of things this week, I think, in the podcast. We have the disappointment of the Madrid result. We have the, should we say, excitement and entertainment of the game against Burnley and everything that was surrounding that. And then we have the unadulterated joy of Stoke being relegated. But we'll come to those things later on. First of all, some introductions. I'm Matt H, and I'm glad to say we also have Pete. Hello, Pete.
Hello there, Matt. Lovely to talk to you towards the end of a lovely, long, beautiful bank holiday weekend.
It has. It's been a very nice day. I have, as is my normal thing, not gone outside because I can't stand heat. So I've very much stayed inside.
So you stay in the kitchen.
Pretty well, exactly. As opposed to being outside, yes. But it has been a very nice day. I dare say I'll go outside at some point tomorrow when I believe it's supposed to be just as nice. But I'll get some shorts on or something. I'll be all right. Matt V is not with us today. Unfortunately, he's not able to make it. But we will make sure we're all together next week for our last pod of the season. Well, let's get on with it then. It will be our last pod of the season next season, barring anything weird happening, because of the result in Madrid last week. Arsenal, as we know, went for their Europa League semi-final second leg, tied 1-1 after the first leg, and needed to score certainly in Madrid to win or to at least get the game into extra time. Extra time never happened. Arsenal lost 1-0. A goal by Diego Costa just before half-time was enough. Madrid were extremely good defensively. We never really looked quite good enough up front, and despite trying and despite by no means being disgraced, we just couldn't do enough to get on the score sheet. And then, once you get one, who knows what happens. But I've rattled through what happened in the game very quickly there, but let's have a bit more detail on it. Pete, any thoughts on the team? I think it was pretty much the team we expected, although no Mkhitaryan, which was perhaps a slight surprise that he didn't start.
Yeah, I think that was the slight disappointment. I think having seen him play pretty well away to Man U on the previous Sunday, it was a bit of a surprise not to see him in there, not to see him starting. I guess really there was, I suppose it was reasonable to give Jack Wilshere his reward for, give the same team their reward for playing the first leg, even though they actually didn't do that well in it. I guess it was reasonable to say, well, look, this is the team that got us here. They should start to give it a go in the second leg. But to my mind, it was a bit of a shame we didn't start with Mkhitaryan. But I think, again, you know that it's nice to have something on the bench that can actually affect a game, and you know that Jack's likely to get tired at some point, and so it probably was the best idea to start with him on the bench.
Maybe a bit of a toss-up, really, wasn't it, just to which way they went, and that was the way. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Maybe looking back, actually, but again, there would have been no reason to do this in advance. But probably the fullbacks were the people who we might have actually wished to see someone else in those positions.
Yeah, so we can come on to the detail, as it were. I thought the first half hour we generally did pretty well. I thought we got more into the game as it went on, and of course it was still 0-0 at that point, and anything was possible. Although of course the main event from an Arsenal point of view in that first half hour was Koscielny. No one near him, just went down. It turns out, in hindsight, with hindsight, the information that came out after the game. I looked at it and assumed it was an Achilles, and it turns out that's what it was, ruptured or torn. I'm not sure which. Neither of them sound particularly pleasant. How much do you think that made a difference to the game? And obviously in the first game, all the action was on the other side of things with the sending off for Atletico, and I think it was felt that Arsenal didn't make as much of that as they could have done in terms of being against 10 men for all that time. I thought probably we sort of did okay. Obviously we went down to 10 men. We could replace Koscielny with Callum Chambers in this instance. But how do you think Arsenal did after this? Do you think it was enough? Could we look at this as something that turned the tide, I should say, or was it just something? I'm wondering how important his absence was, really.
Well, I think it was just tragic more than anything. I don't think it had that much effect on the game. As you say, we were still playing well for a good half hour of the first half, and he was off after 11 minutes. And other than it just being really tragic to see a guy who's given so much to the club and been through so much pain and had a chronic problem with his Achilles, see it explode like that in the middle of nowhere, and know that that's probably the end, certainly for this season and quite possibly for good, was just horrific. But I don't think it really had a huge effect on the rest of the team. I think Chambers came in and did a pretty good job, and other than feeling terribly sorry for Koscielny himself, no, I don't think it had that much effect.
Yes, I mean, I was focusing on the game there, but you're quite right. The game, I agree. I don't think it made a massive difference. But yeah, of course, from a personal point of view, it's very disappointing. He's going to miss the World Cup, and will he get that chance again? It is very sad from a personal view, as it were, of things. But we'll stick to the game for the moment. I felt around after the half-hour mark, Atletico started getting back into it, and of course there was, I don't want to use the term sucker punch again because we used that a lot last week for their goal, and perhaps it wouldn't be quite fair on this occasion, but just before half-time, and it had to be Costa, of course, didn't it, gave them the lead. Any thoughts on the goal and the frustration of conceding just before half-time?
Well, I didn't feel too bad about it, actually, I must say. I mean, it was an absolutely terrible time to concede when we've been playing really well in the first half. I say playing well, but let's face it, we should have taken a chance in that first half and didn't. So that's where we fell down, really. But in a sense, that goal made no difference to the game. We knew we needed to score anyway, so I wasn't too disappointed in some ways. I mean, yeah, it was another pretty hopeless piece of defending, and it just make you sigh. And but it didn't feel anything like as bad as the equalising goal in the first leg.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, funny enough, we were obviously thinking the same kind of things. I thought we needed a goal anyway. So this doesn't change anything in that sense. Obviously, there's a difference between whether it's a draw or for a win, but I couldn't see us keeping Atletico out for the whole game. Anyway, I think we did well just to get them down to one. I mean, as we went into the second half, we carried on quite well. I think there were still chances coming. We started. My problem was that nothing seemed to fall quite right. It was to the wrong person, or it was to the wrong side, or the bounce didn't quite go the right way. I'm not saying it's bad luck. It's just one of those things that nothing seemed to fall quite in the way it should have done, which I suppose is a bit like saying it's bad luck, but perhaps there's something bigger there about different players may have been able to do different things had they been presented with those opportunities. We did make the change. We did bring Mkhitaryan on with 22 minutes left, which was quite promising. Well, I was hoping he would come on a little bit earlier, actually, given the situation. He did have a volley, I seem to remember, not long after he came on. But anything else you'd like to say about that sort of first half of the second half, if you see what I mean? Or the game as a whole, for that matter.
I think it was a struggle, wasn't it? The whole of the second half, you could see the game had that Atletico were just absolutely comfortable doing what they were doing, and just loving the fact that they'd already got the goal. That meant that even if we scored, still it would only mean going to extra time. They knew that they could just do whatever they wanted to, and that they were good enough to keep us out. I think probably we could have made more of our chances throughout the whole game, but and it's a bit of a disappointment we didn't see Mkhitaryan a bit earlier than that, who maybe could have had an impact. But really, this tie was lost in the first leg, wasn't it? And I think that's what we all spent the rest of the second half thinking.
We were getting close occasionally, weren't we? But there wasn't really any major threat. I mean, looking at who was on the bench, there wasn't really, with all due respect to Maitland-Niles and Iwobi, who had done very well, and others, there wasn't really someone on there you thought, here's a great threat we can bring on from the bench. You mentioned the fullbacks earlier. I mean, one thing I noticed, I thought our crossing was particularly unsurprisingly poor. Something that I think has been quite good most of this season. I don't know what was going on. I don't know if it was just me. I thought it was awful on last Thursday.
Nacho was appalling, wasn't he? I mean, and as you say, surprisingly so. It's not something we've seen regularly, was it? I mean, he's in fact he's been quite astonishingly good in terms of offensive play, hasn't he? And he's been scoring goals and all sorts. But I mean, I thought particularly, surprising and almost like there was just something wrong to the extent that neither of them could put in what anything resembling a decent cross all night.
It was it's quite something. The only other person I was going to mention in terms of individual performance, and please feel free to add any others you think. I thought Xhaka deserves some credit actually, because he, although he's had stick recently, a couple of games, he seemed to be, maybe it was just me, but again I thought he was putting in some good tackles. I thought he was getting in the right place. He wasn't looking quite as shaky isn't maybe the right word, but quite as a liability defensively as perhaps he's been accused of being before. I thought he was worth a comment, and overall it was a perfectly decent performance. It was a decent performance against a very good team, but just wasn't good enough. Anything you'd like to mention about any individuals or anything else, just a general point before we move on?
No, I think you've covered it. Yeah, I agree. Xhaka was actually and has continued to really show people what he can be about, and it was a reasonably good performance from a team who at the end of the day were always going to struggle to break down a team who are that good at defending. Basically, once having given them the opportunity to be able to defend for the whole game at home, by conceding the equalising goal in the first leg, looking back, other than, as I say, other than maybe playing Mkhitaryan from the beginning or whatever, I don't think there was anything we were ever going to be able to do on that night, other than maybe just get a bit more lucky.
Bit of luck wouldn't have done any harm, would it? No, so that's we'll have a couple more minutes on this actually, because obviously Matt isn't here, so we may we have a bit more time perhaps because there's only two rather than three of us. But more generally, of course, that's obviously the end of our Europa League campaign this season. We already know, of course, we will be in the Europa League next season again. Now, you were very clear on your thoughts on this at the start of the season in terms of this is a bit of fun, akin sort of to our League Cup run.
Yeah.
Now, we've all sat here and talked about this, and I think we were broadly in agreement on that. Of course, as it's gone on, as we've gone into March, April, May, it took on a bit more significance. And the team, the makeup of the team changed and all the rest of it. Now, given it's a given that we're in the Europa League next season, would you go for the same kind of approach? Obviously, there's going to be a different man in charge. There's going to be different players, you assume. What kind of approach would you still say? Let's do the same thing, or do you think we do need to focus completely on the league and just have kids in this or anything? It's a long way away, of course. We've got months to go before this comes up, but any early thoughts?
I think if it was me, I'd have a very similar approach to this season. I mean, it's actually worked okay, hasn't it? It's worked really well. Other than not being able to get past Atleti in a semi-final, a two-legged semi-final. It's worked. The approach we've taken has worked really well. So yes, I would use the same again. And it's just depressing to be in a situation where you're going to be back in this Thursday, Sunday rut, which I don't know whether this is correct, but it really does seem to affect a team's performance. I think in the league to be playing these Thursday, Sunday matches, it's just no fun at all. I mean, yeah, it was quite fun at the beginning, but as the season's worn on, it's just been horrible. I hate going to football on a Sunday. Football's supposed to be played at 3:00 on a Saturday, I more than anything, I really find it the thought that we're in it again next season horrendous.
Well, that's they probably won't be putting that on the posters, I imagine.
Well, as I said, did I say to you last week that the thing that would have been quite satisfying about going out on being maybe ending up behind Burnley would have been the possibility that we'd have had to play these July qualification games, but we could have lost them.
True. And there is no longer anywhere else we can drop into.
Exactly.
That would be it.
So, yeah, bit of a chance missed there.
Well, I mean, you're tongue in cheek there, obviously, but you do wonder with the new manager, whoever that's going to be, and I'm going to come to that later on, just very, very briefly. I think we'll discuss it more next week, but I wanted to mention it briefly, just because there's some interesting potential developments. That's exactly the kind of thing they might think. They might think, well, sod this. I'm really not interested in this competition. So let's do what we can to get out of it. So that's an interesting thought. I can see you being the assistant for that kind of thing. They would like that kind of thing, right? Well, let's move on from there then. I mean, to be honest, we got to the final four. We put in some good performances. We had the game away at Milan and things like that were fairly memorable. As far as Europa League stuff goes, we had the home game to kick things off, of course, against Cologne, which was memorable for all sorts of reasons. So we've certainly had some entertainment out of the Europa League this season. Yeah. Which maybe not winning the whole thing, but we've certainly had entertainment in terms of the journey, as it were, through it. Right. Well, let's move on then back to the Premier League. Now we know we're coming to the end of our long and pretty unsuccessful Premier League campaign. So, but yesterday wasn't really about that. Yesterday was our game against Burnley, which our 5-0 win secured our 6th spot. But it wasn't really about that. It was all about the Arsene Wenger goodbye, for want of a better word. We'll come to that in a second. So what I thought we'd do to keep things nice and neat is if we just talk about the game, and we can be as brief as you like on this. I mean, I was able to watch it. Slightly weirdly, I found a very good stream, one of the best streams I've ever found, sort of a live football thing. Didn't break up, lovely quality, but it was about 2 minutes slow. So I knew what was going to happen because I was getting updates on my phone quite a while before it happened. That aside, so it was a slightly odd way of watching the game. Normally it's not that much of a difference, but I mean, to sum up, we looked very good. Burnley, I think, were already on the beach. As you were there, is there anything you would like to pick out particularly about a performance, one of the goals, or anything particularly? Because I don't think the game is really the main focus of yesterday, but I'd like to not ignore it completely.
No, well, I think probably most of us were expecting to win it in the last minute with a dubious goal that Burnley hated us for scoring, but somehow that didn't happen for once, and we just absolutely trounced them, didn't we? And it was a really wonderful day, and oddly enough, without Mesut Ozil, which was one of the odd things. But
I've been watching for some time before I realised he wasn't playing, which I suppose showed that the team was playing quite well, because I sort of hadn't noticed he wasn't.
Yeah, and it certainly showed us that Lacazette and Aubameyang can play together.
Well, I was going to pick up. Yeah, I was going to pick up on a couple of individual things. So that was very interesting. I mean, did you? Well, they scored 3 goals. I mean, there's not much more evidence you need, I suppose, about how well they can play together and fed off each other, I think.
Yeah, I think that was it. I mean, it was almost like they were playing like a front two at some points, and it was probably the first time this season that we've seen them being able to link up as well as they did, and scored some very lovely goals in the process of doing so. But I think my favourite is the Kolasinac one, which was
yes.
I mean, when he hit that, it stayed hit.
It really did. It really did. Yes, we won't go through all the goals, but it was Aubameyang and Lacazette scored in the first half, and then Kolasinac got things underway in the start of the second half with Iwobi, and then another one for Aubameyang later on, wrapping things up. We scored it almost, not exactly, but quite neat sort of time intervals. It was all sort of quite regular, which was very, very nice. And yes, I thought that was good. I thought there were lots of things that were good. Mavropanos starting again in defence, which I think is an interesting sign, because it wasn't necessarily the team you'd expect. It was a bit, it was a bit of a mixed up team, but I wasn't necessarily expecting him to start again. He seemed to impress people last Thursday. Anything? Yeah. When he played previously, but anything you spotted?
Well, I spent the majority of the first half applauding everything he did, basically. He does. He does appear, for a 20-year-old, to be extremely competent and know exactly what he's doing. He against some experienced players in Burnley, who are physical bunch who play football as well, but he could stand up to them in all respects. And to see him playing alongside Callum Chambers did give you some hope for the future, particularly in light of Koscielny's absence. And it did look, I think, I'm proud of Arsene and the way he does stay loyal to his players and the ones here, and which is probably the reason why he hasn't brought Mavropanos in before, and he has continued to play Koscielny and Mustafi, even when Mustafi's made some horrendous errors in past, and we've been involved in terribly comic defending. He probably has continued with them because Mavropanos is not his signing and it's not his player, and he wants to stay loyal to the people that he, even in the last few days of his reign has wanted that. And he's been able to get in the last couple of games, and he's shown that he's potentially a very bright spot for the future.
He has, and it's interesting to focus on those bright spots, and I think we'll come on a second to the departures, but very interesting. I think certainly I'm starting to get quite excited potentially about what's going to happen in the future. Now, we've been told that the new manager, whoever he may be, isn't actually going to have any money to spend or nothing huge, which slightly tempers that, but all of this stuff obviously will play out over the next few weeks. But moving then to the departures, before we get into the big one that's a sort of departure but also sort of not a departure. Per Mertesacker came on. He is moving to become the academy manager. I'm not sure what the exact title is, but I think that's what it is. Nice to see him come on for the last sort of 10 minutes or so.
Oh, that was fantastic. And so I spent the first half applauding Mavropanos and everything he did, and spent the last 15 minutes applauding Per Mertesacker and everything he did. It's just a real shame he didn't get to score. There was one point where we had a corner, and I couldn't believe we actually took it quickly. And poor old Per still lumbering up to try. Give him a chance.
Well, you can say this is the manager's fault, isn't he? Because he instills in all these players, keep the ball moving quickly, and he forgot to tell them not to when Per is making his slow and steady way up the pitch.
He did actually just about get there in the end, though, because we as ever recycled the ball a fair bit. By that time, we had made it in there, and but unfortunately, it wasn't to be. And of course, the other one that wasn't to be was the Danny Welbeck shot. What a shot that was! That would have capped the day perfectly for me. 6-0 with a sixth goal from a Danny Welbeck rocket would have just been amazing. So it was very sad to see that, or a great shame to see that cannon off the post and away to safety. But
well, we can't have everything, but we got most.
And it was a beautiful day and beautiful weather, and just a wonderful performance against a Burnley team that didn't seem to have any problem at all.
So, Burnley deserve credit actually for the way they played this season, given how well they'd done in the table. But they were not at the races yesterday at all. I mean, we were good, but they really weren't there. And you can quite understand why they may have taken the metaphorical day off, because they've had an excellent season.
Well, they have actually, and but I've forgotten there for a minute that although I haven't forgiven them. I'm getting close to forgiving them after having lost 5-0, being decent opponents getting thumped on Arsene Wenger's last home game. But Jack Cork decided to turn us round.
Oh goodness! I didn't even spot that.
I just could not believe it. On Arsene Wenger's final home game, you're going to turn us round, and unbelievable, absolutely shocking. So never forget that name, Jack Cork.
Well, we'll let him off. As you say, it all worked out in the end.
There was a suggestion from somebody I was with that maybe it was Sean Dyche who told him to do it so he could get an idea of what it was like to attack the North Bank in the second half.
Well, I had a joke here about wondering if Sean Dyche had been seen measuring up the manager's chair at an opportune moment. Although he has taken a tumble in the betting, and we'll come to that in a minute, because he was. I'm not too keen for him to get
after that.
Well, funnily enough, I think I checked before the game yesterday, but yes, it certainly wouldn't have helped given what happened. We won't talk about the potential manager in the future now, because that will be stuff for next week, and I'm sure in the summer at some point something's going to happen, and then we can have a proper discussion just based on that. But I would like to talk a little bit, not very long really, about our current manager, and we saw the ceremony beforehand and the nice guard of honour, and then afterwards with the speech and the lap of the track and lap of the pitch, and giving him the 2003-4 golden trophy, which, quite frankly, I saw it again yesterday. They've got one ugly little thing it was. So 500 Arsenal, just very keen to get it out of the.
Let's get rid of this.
There's something slightly classless about the Premier League trophy. I think it's over the top, isn't it? And I think a little gold one with a little silver crown doesn't make it look any more humble, should we say? So maybe they thought, yeah, it's a good idea. We'll get rid of that. But as someone who was there, you've sort of alluded to it a little bit anyway. For me, because they showed it on Sky, when they finished the Chelsea-Liverpool game, they went over to Arsenal, so we saw that happening anyway, so I could watch it on a proper screen rather than my little computer screen. I thought it hit the right kind of notes. What did you think, as someone who was there?
Yeah, very much so. It was just a great day, and I'm really, really glad I was there. I think that what had been planned, it was just strange the way that it really was coming together. And there was vaguely some people I'd heard some talk that, following our exit from the Europa League, that it might be a bit of a damp squib on this, that people wouldn't stay around and people, there wouldn't be this thing to look forward to. But actually, looking back, I think it was actually better that we didn't have that almost. That, if we had got that final to look forward to, then this day wouldn't have been all about Arsene. It wouldn't have been, yes, it was our final chance to say goodbye to him, but it would have been different to think, well, there's still this possibility that we might win something down here. And it was nice to see that even knowing that we are finishing sixth and we are not going to be in the Champions League and we're not going to win a European trophy, that so many people still came to that game and so many people stayed around afterwards to show their appreciation to this guy who has been magnificent for us for 22 years. So I say, whether you agree with the results or not, he's just a wonderful person and a brilliant manager, and the like of which you will never see again. Probably, certainly not at Arsenal, and almost certainly not at any football club in this country. And I just thought it was a real tribute that so many people were there to see him. Everyone was wearing, in the way that the club were giving away the red shirts and had asked people to put them on. And, normally in those circumstances, people just don't do it, do they? They don't want to wear those things or whatever, but everyone was wearing them. Everyone was singing all throughout the game, every single chant we've ever had, basically. The Burnley fans were chanting "One Arsene Wenger" at one point in time. It's a beautiful, glorious sunshine day. The guy at the back of us who gets the chants going, towards the end when he was struggling to get people going, he was going, "There's 10 minutes left, 10 minutes left." And everyone would get back into it, 2 minutes left, 2 minutes left, and everyone would get back into it again. And just brilliant, that everyone, there was not, some people want Arsene gone, there's no doubt about that, and are thrilled that he's out of the way, but no one displayed any kind of that emotion on the day. They were all there just to show their appreciation for him. And you've been there for laps of appreciation before, where there's nothing particular to celebrate, and there's nothing and nothing particular to look forward to or particularly to appreciate in some cases. And they really are damp squib. This was nothing like that. This was everyone stayed and wanted to be there and really wanted to show their appreciation to this bloke, and that was wonderful. And I think what the actual club did on the day and the things they put on were great. It was all very touching. It was, at one point, it was like seeing half my Arsenal life disappear. You've got Per Mertesacker saying, well, not saying goodbye, but retiring. Alex Scott, my favourite women's player, retiring. Vic Akers, a guy who I've seen win things with Arsenal women. It was just, oh my goodness, what's happening here? It felt so much like an end of an era, not just because of Arsene Wenger going, but because of all those things. It just quite quite a wonderful day, really, and a wonderful send-off for him. And the thing I think I was happiest about was the fact that he actually seemed reasonably cheerful. I didn't think
Reasonably, yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, obviously, potentially he was a bit emotional himself, but I think he was cheerful and all right about it, and is, hopefully he will find something that he wants to do after this, and go on and do it with the elan that he approaches everything. And I really hope for that for the future for him.
Well, that's very, very nicely put. I mean, the things I found most moving actually in this whole thing is not necessarily his speech or other things like that. It's actually been what the opposition people have done. So it was the thing at Man United last week was very, I thought was quite nice. I think the Burnley fans, if that was all in, it wasn't in jest. It seemed pretty genuine.
It was absolutely heartfelt. I mean, they've been their chance had been taking the mickey out of us up until that point, but it was absolutely clear they were showing their appreciation to this.
And it's been that approach from other people, and of course all the nice things that lots of people have said, which I think has been very touching. We'll move on though, because we will talk about other managers, but I'm wary of the time, and we will, I'm sure, come back to this next week when it really is it. And although we've done quite a bit of this over the past couple of weeks now, the manager betting, I've joked about Sean Dyche. I wouldn't mind a young English manager coming in. I mean, the last managers we've had, it seems silly because the last ones, or the current ones, they've been there for so long. George Graham, Bruce Rioch, Sean Dyche would fit into that kind of category, wouldn't he? Manager being plucked from another club within the league, whatever. I wouldn't be against that kind of appointment, but I also wouldn't be against the much bigger European names that we're talking about. The reason I was going to mention it was because of the interesting stuff this week, when I looked yesterday, possibly the day before, and I'm not sure how to say this name, so Buvac, Klopp's right-hand man, the story came out last week that he wasn't going to be his right-hand man for the rest of the season. He was the favourite in the betting for the Arsenal job. He's now, though, not disappeared, but he's gone back out again, and now Allegri is the very clear favourite, followed by Enrique, who keeps going up and down like the proverbial fiddler's elbow in the betting. Now, of course, the betting market doesn't necessarily reflect what's going to happen. It reflects where people are putting their money, which is not necessarily the same thing. But it's interesting. Ancelotti's there, and Brendan Rodgers is still hanging in there. It's at 16-1, but it's looking like Allegri at the moment. But then if I look tomorrow, it might be different again. So I just wanted to mention that as a brief thing. We won't talk about that now because we'll save that for next week and future. But the other thing from the Premier League over the weekend. So as we've noticed, we are now sixth place, and that's where we'll be. The other thing to mention, as I've alluded to earlier, is Stoke's relegation, with Ryan Shawcross making the error that pretty much guaranteed it. I certainly enjoyed all that. Pete, anything you'd like to add apart from just one long laugh?
That'll do for me.
It really is quite marvellous. And the fact that they've managed to be relegated before West Brom, who look absolutely dead and buried. And Stoke, although as we've discussed, we don't have a problem with the manager, whose name has completely gone out of my head.
Paul.
Yes, Paul Thingy. Thingy. We discussed it before, and we thought he seemed perfectly nice.
Hopefully, he'll find himself a decent club.
Well, this is the thing, whether he leaves or not. But perhaps we don't need to say anything. Paul Lambert, yes, of course.
Lambert.
Perhaps we don't need to say any more, other than I think Stoke will be gone, and hopefully they'll be gone for some time, because the Championship is not an easy league to get out of. So any luck, that's the last we'll be seeing of them for some time. Right, I think we can all take a moment to enjoy that.
Can I also enjoy one other thing about football this weekend?
You certainly can.
Which I don't think this is actually something I should enjoy, and I'm feeling a little bit guilty about it.
Carry on.
I am finding it quite amusing, at the very least, that there is a possibility that Tottenham are going to finish outside the top four.
Yes. This all sort of came in yesterday, didn't it? Particularly with Chelsea's win over Liverpool, really sort of crystallised that as a possibility. Yeah.
Now, I don't know if I should be enjoying Chelsea winning football matches.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? No, it's not great.
But I am finding this whole situation most amusing, is all I can say.
Well, I don't disagree. It will be hilarious if Spurs find themselves in the Europa League next year, given they really shouldn't be, quite frankly.
And actually, that would actually make it worthwhile for us being in it, actually.
It could be, couldn't it? Well, there is the danger, of course, of losing, and then you're in trouble. If
I don't think there's any danger of that.
No, but it's something to keep us entertained for the last week of the season, certainly.
Yeah.
Right, speaking of which, let's get to that then. Predictions now, just to catch up from last week. Where were we? Let me look at my sheet here. So Matt got a point right for saying Atletico would beat us, and he's won the cup competition. So he got 13 points if you take all the cup games. I got 12, Pete got 10. We all did fairly pathetically, quite frankly, given the number of cup games we've had this season. And in fact, Matt's won the whole thing already because he's already on 41 points. I'm on 34, Pete's on 31. There's only 2 more games left anyway. So Pete's
the second place to play for here, Matt.
There's second place to play for here. I've already put my predictions in the spreadsheet, and I've already had predictions from Matt. So as Matt is the champion-elect, I'll give you mine and his predictions up front. So we'll get through these quickly. So we play Leicester away on it's Wednesday, isn't it? And then we play Huddersfield away on Saturday. Sunday, of course. Leicester are terrible at the moment. It's just worth throwing that in. Huddersfield might have needed a point or more from that home game for them on the last game of the season. They're probably going to be okay now because they got a perhaps slightly unexpected point against Man City yesterday. So it could be that neither of them have anything to play for apart from position and pride, or it could be that Huddersfield still have something going on. Well, I'll tell you my predictions very quickly. I've said 2-0 for both because they're away games. You have no idea what kind of team's going to be played, what kind of emotion might be involved for all the participants. So I'm just going for 2-0 for both on the basis that if we can play like we did yesterday with a bit of freedom, a bit of pressure off, then maybe that will come to a relatively comfortable away win. Matt has gone for a 3-1 win at Leicester because they're terrible at the moment, essentially. And a 1-1 draw at Huddersfield, again, based on the idea that Huddersfield might need to get something from that. So, Pete, there's a quick run through our predictions. What are your thoughts on those 2 games?
Yeah, they're quite interesting final games. I mean, utterly pointless bothering to play them, of course. But as you say, it's interesting the approach. Leicester have got absolutely nothing to play for, but I don't know how much money you get for a point up the league table. They could still finish below Newcastle, so it is worth them, having a pop to some extent. But really, 9th, 10th, probably nothing in there. And Huddersfield, potentially, we could be relegating them there, couldn't we? Which presumably means that David Wagner is definitely not going to be our new manager. Yes. So I'm just going to go for a scoreline that I have found, just wonderful all throughout the year. It hasn't actually won me any points, but I'm determined to stick with it, and I'm going to go 2-1 Arsenal in both of those games.
2-1. You've got the odd. You have gone for it a lot, haven't you? You've got the odd point with it. I don't think you've ever got a maximum score with it. But
no, exactly. But I'm determined to stick with it and see what happens.
To be honest, we're not really playing for anything either. I mean, there's a vague chance you could overtake me, but you'd have to be right on both of them, which is not impossible. So that would be a bit of fun if that works out, although I'll be devastated, obviously, at that point. All right, then. Well, on that basis, we'll wrap it up, I think. So we will be back next week. We'll have all 3 of us, so whenever we can all be together, I think, would be suitable for the last game of the season, or the last week of the season. I'm assuming, I don't know if Pete has a thought about this, there's not going to be a manager announcement now before the end of the season. I mean, Arsenal could surprise us, of course, but I would assume nothing's going to happen now until after next week. It might even be, immediately on the Monday. It might be a week today, in which case we can obviously chat about that. But if something happens before that, we might just try and slip a pod in before. But otherwise, we will be back next Monday to discuss those final 2 games of the season, have a bit of a season roundup as well. So that will be an interesting one. Let us see what we can our thoughts about the season as a whole. So for the moment, Pete, I will say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's been a real pleasure, as I say, to talk to you after a very emotional final home game of the season.
Well, that's great, and thank you for your thoughts on it and being able to give us that sort of perspective from someone who was actually there. Matt, as I say, will be back next week with us, so we'll have all 3 of us. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and we'll speak to you then. Take care, bye-bye.